I want to start off with Mark Schnapp. It's interesting. I didn't realize that the prison labor is a huge thing in the US. It began during slavery, exploded as incarceration rates soared and slavery petered out. Laws in some states spell it out clearly. Prisoners aren't classified as employees, so it doesn't matter what happens to them. I was alarmed, Mike, Mark, to find out that many prisoners are used when there's an emergency, like, for instance, fire breaks out or what have you, and they get maybe a 24-hour instruction. In one case, a team of female prisoners, their feet were burned and they had to bind up their melting shoes, told to get back out there and keep helping. Injuries are, I think already California's got people lining up, but in many states, they're sent to jobs where they might lose a limb in machinery and what have you. And it's a tough job getting any compensation at all.
It's extremely tough. You just mentioned California. Interesting enough, there is a series still on Netflix about the California prison fire camps, and it's called, I think, Fire Country or something. But and they don't make it. Nobody gets hurt other than the people who are actually real fire people. But that being said, with respect to the compensation, you're right. I mean, it is very difficult for a prisoner to get compensation, and there's two sources of relief. One is the state, which there are limitations on anybody's ability to recover damages from a state. In particular, prisoners, they have basically, you're correct, no rights. And then there's also the company that actually used them. And I didn't even realize that there were, commercial companies that were using prisoners to process food, for example. And I was shocked at that. And so, and again, they would also be limitations as to whether or not they're entitled to workman's compensation, those kind of laws. Because you're right, they're not employees under the law. And so there are different issues. There are statutory limitations. There are also laws, which, for example, a workman's comp law, if it's even applicable, is a function of how much you are earning, and prisoners don't earn very much. There are state laws that don't allow prisoners to get compensation from the state. And as you said, as I now understand, there are companies that are using prison labor, to process things like food, which is I really found shocking. And I see no reason. I should see no reason. Yeah.
No, I don't. It's 700 in California. More than 700 work-related injuries were recorded between 2018 and 2022 in the state's prisons industry program. But yeah, I was shocked that they can be used as firefighters and in times of emergency, and they're just given a basic rudimentary classroom scheme, and they go out there and they're working side by people, as you said, like firefighters who've had no end of experience and not necessarily even wearing the right equipment, and working alongside the road, cleaning up the roads. Already there's a case this year of a prisoner being killed, but it sounds over the top, but it's like prisoners are cannon fodder for a lot of industries.
Well, in the old movies, you always see prisoners in the quote-unquote chain gangs cleaning up the roads. But this is a whole different level of problems. In California, you're right. I mean, there's also an incentive for prisoners to do that kind of work, and that it can lead to a lowering of their sentences. But it's still, you're correct. I mean, they're not given adequate training. They're not given adequate protection. And more importantly, if they are forced to get treatment within the prison system itself, those prison hospitals or medical facilities are horrible. So they are really treated like third world citizens, and not even third world citizens, people without real rights. There are very few laws that would allow a prisoner to recover for that kind of injury, and whether it be statutory limitations or as I said before, workman's comp, whether it even applies, it really leaves them with very little recourse if they're injured.
Absolutely. I heard of one hospital which had the doctor running the whole establishment was an ex-con himself and had been struck off and hadn't had a medical license for forever. And he was running the whole program. And as you said, dealing with people who had lost a limb or something like that. It is horrible. It's very different in the UK, isn't it, Joseph? And as I said, this is something that's got people hot in the collar. You and I have spoken about this, touched upon this case before. But this is Patrick Chandler, I beg your pardon, Stephen Wilson, who was attacked by Patrick Chandler in July 2018, someone who was not long into a life sentence for killing somebody, I believe. He's been awarded, he was a convicted aggravated burglary, it was called. He was awarded £5.5 million for being stabbed 16 times in a prison canteen because this chap that stabbed him shouldn't have been allowed anywhere near knives. He says he's in a chair. He was a fit young man. He came out of that kitchen not being that. The prosecution said, Your Honour, this guy's never earned an honest penny in his life. Why should he get 5.5 million? And as I said before, in one paper alone, there's like 4,000 clicks of people going, I'm starving, I'm on the breadline, I haven't got heat, I've worked all my life, I've paid my taxes, da-da-da-da, and yet this guy gets 5.5 million. That's the feeling out there, Joseph.
Yeah, it is. And we talked about it in May, and I remembered that although we always politely express our opinions, I did get a sense that we disagreed ever so slightly about some of the sentiment in it, although I think we always agree on this show, don't we? Yeah, the law is the law. Well, let's go through it. I mean, first of all, the facts. Prison service allowed a psychopathic killer who had said he was fantasizing about attacks on other people into a kitchen, unsupervised with other inmates. And not only did he not only did he stab this guy to the extent that he was in hospital for a few weeks, he's basically a cripple. He can walk unaided. He can walk with a stick for a short period of time. He's basically functionally wheelchair bound, and it will get worse. And he will need round-the-clock care until at least round-the-clock care, in the words of the judge, definitely by the age of 60, according to the medical evidence that the court heard, not just what he said. Now, at least getting on, I should say, for 50% of that award, 2.4 million, relates exclusively to the cost of his care over the period. It's not a reward. It's not pain, what lawyers call pain, suffering, and loss of amenity. There is an element of the further 3 million that relates to lost earnings, because although, and as it's been well pointed out, he is somebody that, especially in his earlier life, most of his activity seems to have been criminal. I think the general trend really with somebody who's involved in crime in their 20s, even their early 30s, is they're unlikely to be an active criminal, less likely, I should say, to be an active criminal and outside the legitimate economy in their 40s and 50s. And the government's lawyers specifically to say that because this guy hasn't paid much tax or been in regular jobs in the past, that means that we have to treat him as if he's somebody who never would have earned in the future. Well, the judge wasn't very impressed with that. And I have to tell you, there's a bit of a murky undertone to this whole government case that I have to say, reading the Daily Mail article towards the end, although I haven't been able, despite approaching the journalist in question, to get a copy of the judgment that I think was handed out at court, but it's not widely yet available, because I think that the hearing was only in the last 48 hours. But there's a really murky undertone to it to do with witnesses, because it appears from judges' comments that the government's own independent expert witnesses, they're supposed to use independent medical experts who have an overriding duty to the court. We've talked about this, haven't we, in previous months in connection with other cases. Those witnesses, it appeared that their evidence, shall we say charitably, began to harden against the case of Mr. Wilson as the case progressed. And in fact, the judge expressed serious concerns as to impartiality. Now, the judge stopped short, it seems, of suggesting suggesting that lawyers had been placing pressure specifically in a very English way. The judge has avoided making criticisms directly as to what looks, I have to say, objectively, at some level, somewhere in the team, points towards professional impropriety, whether it's a witness or anybody else. The judge has said, well, there should be soul searching. And I've asked for there to be soul searching. It's clear that there was something rotten in this case. Whether it's simply a question of expert witnesses over-egging things, I have to say the way in which this was publicized, the way in which, as early as May, because we were talking about it then, it appears that the government was briefing the press, making sure everybody is aware of it, making sure everybody has the judgment that I still can't get as a lawyer, and we've got this weirdness about witnesses. I think this case stinks, and I don't know why, because I don't think we're being told, and the judge in that wonderfully British kind of will avoid the scandal and we won't direct too much attention in terms of accusation, has said, well, we do require some soul searching. I think this was a murky case, and it's very interesting to me. People aren't discussing it for the reasons perhaps they should be.